Hello, everybody, and welcome to Holly Hamel Hive podcast picture show. Today, I have with me the lovely Jennifer Holmes with the Akashic Code, and we are going to share all the beautiful things that we have between us with all of you. And let's just get started. Jen, would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for this conversation. It's going to be very expansive. I'll share a little bit about who I am. So I work as a business coach, and I generally work with coaches, healers, online entrepreneurs, and help them. They've made some progress in their business, but they're really looking to scale, but not just with strategy, also with the energetics and the emotional aspects that actually often aren't spoken about, but often go with being an online business. So that's how I work and who I am. So I'm very grateful to be here.
Absolutely. Very good. Yes, I've been working with Jen during my development stage of my business, and it's been going really, really well. The way that you are able to go straight into the heart of the issue and really help me in this extreme confusion, because it turns out that when we begin our own businesses, there's often, especially when something's so heart-centered and so divinely led, so channeled, it can be difficult to wrap your head around how to create a logical and technical plan. And so you've been so instrumental in helping me to sift out and distill it into bite-sized pieces. So I'm really grateful for you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I feel like what you just shared there is going to really be reflective of some of the things that we're going to be speaking about today, about the energetics and just kind of bringing in different parts of you into the creative process and business. I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. So that one of the reasons that I chose you to be my business coach is because you work with the Akashic Records. And so if you could please explain to us a little bit about what that is and how it serves us.
Yes, absolutely. So perhaps I'll tell a short story about how I first discovered the Akashic Records, and then that will kind of lead into it. So when I simply had a book about the Akashic Records. It was one of those things I think many of us know, where something catches your eye either on social media or like somewhere like, oh, and you get this little peak of interest. And then I kind of started going down the rabbit hole with it. And I had this book and I was simply just sitting on my sofa in the morning with a cup of coffee. And it invited you to ask a question with the records closed and then with the records open. I'll describe what they are in a minute. And the wisdom that came through from the Akashic Records was so profound, so not something I would have thought of myself. My hand was moving of its own accord. I started crying because I was kind of in this state of awe and being scared at the same time because it was so new. And from there, it kind of opened up, and it's this space that's kind of like being described as a morphic field. Often it's almost like a giant database where all of our soul records live. Everything that we've experienced, past, present, and future, even though it's all kind of one thing, are all housed in this one place. So in a way, it's one of the best places for us to understand the evolution of our soul journey and where our soul is pointing us, what lessons it has to learn, how it can learn those lessons in the unfolding of certain things in life. And so really it's here for our expansion, I would say. So when we kind of draw this Akashic Records into our experience of work and creation and how we want to show up in our business, it comes from that real, authentic sounds a little bit overused, but it's so authentic, it's unreal, it's raw, it's touches those places within you that you just know are so undoubtedly true. And it's just a case of what illusions and what things need to be removed for me to actually step into this version of myself that I'm seeing in the Akashic Records that wants to come forward. So it's very hard to articulate what exactly it is, but the best way to see it is kind of like a giant library of light. I often see it as a pyramid, and it often works in visualizations and in audio. Sometimes it can be felt. But it's in the very subtle energy realms, but it's also everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So kind of maybe answered your question.
Yes. So what would it be in the very simplest terms? Say you had to describe it to a fifth grader. How would you say it?
I would go with the library of light. So imagine this giant library that has everything that there is to know about you in all ways, living and existing, ready for you to go in and source and understand what's needed for you to take your next step. Probably how I'd best describe it.
Excellent.
Yeah, so it's a pretty powerful, very profound, supportive space that can guide you how to best create, and importantly for me, often to understand why you're in resistance to certain things, so that you can then start to maneuver and do certain things so that you can unlock your next. I think we all know what it feels like when you're just like, I don't know why I'm simply just not moving. I know what I need to do, but there's something that's just making me not. And so it helps you really understand what that thing is, so that you can evolve and understand, heal, and do all the things that are necessary so that your next expansion can open and unfold for you.
Yes, that I am very familiar with that feeling. I know what I need to
I think we all are, don't worry, you're not alone.
So what is the how can it inform like what we're actually doing here? Like, what is the point? Like, what is our purpose? What is the meaning of life? Like, why are we here, and how does the Akashic fit into that?
It's interesting because as I've received it from the Akashic Records, there's everything that we're creating is a subjective experience. So one person might say, the purpose of life is to love and care for others. Someone else might say the purpose of life is to serve and uplift humanity. Someone else might say the purpose of life is to heal all of our shadows and integrate them and come into our fullest sovereign self. So fortunately, within the Akashic Records, in a way, all of these things are true, because everything is a subjective experience. So anything that we're seeing as true gets put into the Akashic Records and then kind of becomes a part of objective reality. It becomes a truth of reality. So I don't know if that's getting a bit too esoteric, but I could say what one perspective is of the purpose of life, which I've received it, is to create. It's not to work and to produce things and all of the things that, often when I'm working with people around purpose, they often want to see what they should be doing for work. How should I be working? Whereas often the way that I've received it is it's simply how can you best express and create outwardly how your soul simply wants to create moment by moment. However, that's not the purpose of life. That's how I've received it as the purpose of life. Someone else will receive something different, and their point of view is just as valid and goes into creating the reality as it is. Because I think often we see reality as something that we're experiencing, which we are, but we're also creating reality. So everything and all of our perspectives are going into the Akashic Records to start shaping and molding and helping us be these creators that we are, so we can actually shape the whole of reality, how it's manifesting, which is phenomenal. If you think about it, we have so much power from that perspective. So that's how I would say I've kind of received around the meaning or the purpose of life. But I wouldn't say, hey, this is what it is and you have to believe me. Go off and test it for yourself, right?
So what is it about the Akashic Records that really truly speaks to your heart, that in your being in this lifetime? What is it that calls you in so intimately, and that it is your specific medicine that you're sharing with the world?
I would say for me, my biggest value, or one of my biggest values, is truth, and finding truth and seeking truth and knowing what's real. And so when I can connect in with the Akashic Records, it's a place that resonates with so much truth that if I'm honest from my human self, for me, it brings a very strong sense of safety. It helps me know and understand the truth of why we're here, know and understand the truth of where I've been, where I want to go, so that I can orientate myself in reality. It helps me understand why I'm afraid of certain things, so that I can kind of self-soothe in some way. And that's what I often find is the gift that it brings to the people who work with it and who I work with through it, I suppose, is that it somehow orientates you so you don't feel that sense of confusion and loss. Or if you are in that space, it helps you understand why you're there, and to be patient and to be assured that in divine timing, everything is going to unfold as it needs to. Everything is fine. So I would actually honestly say, from a pure human space, it's safety, which is interesting. I never thought about it in that way until I've spoken about it in this moment. So I would say that, actually, interestingly.
Excellent. Yeah, I can relate to that. It almost feels like it's when I'm lost, it feels like it's a going back to like the master plan, or being able to check back in with the playbook when I've when I've
It's
lost
kind of like the blueprint, right? Like it's, you kind of start calling it like, hang on a, when the world seems so loud and you're being pulled left and right, which is so easy in today's world with these different programs and social media and influences from around us, it's when we can take that moment to pause and drop in and connect with the Akasha, it's like we receive that blueprint and things can make a bit more sense, or we can understand what's needed for us to shift into the space of embodying and allowing that blueprint to land for us, which I feel like is almost everything. It's not sort of sold as almost everything, but it is almost everything.
I love that. What's coming in for me now, as an actor, it's almost like when you're in the middle of a production and you lose your way and you're like, line, and you call out, and then there's, the director's like, okay, this is where you're at. Like, here, say it like this with more motivation, or something. And it feels like that to me, and that's what I'm relating it to in my particular lifetime, because of a theater almost. And so it feels really good to have that playbook, that script, that, okay, where were we at in the story? Oh, yes, this is where I'm going. And like, what's my character? What is my character motivated by? And like, what's important? Okay, connect back to this moment. All right, go. Action.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's, just from knowing you quite well, Holly, here, this sense of when you get that bigger perspective, there's something about seeing all of the pieces on the like chessboard or something, like we're in this like divine game. We're like, oh, I'm over here, and then there's this thing over here. Oh, okay. Like, when we're just in the middle and we're looking at it from the perspective of being the chess piece, it can be a bit like, hang on, where am I going? I can't see where I am. Whereas when you get that, it gives you that real zoom out energy so that you can see, oh, okay, this is the context. I get, okay, I'm fine, I'm safe, I'm good, kind of feeling.
Yeah, that's been so important to me on my journey, is to be able to like zoom out and look at like, okay, where's the plan? Where am I going? Where have I been? Who are the players? Okay. And just to orient myself to what the purpose is, and like what game I'm playing, what role I'm playing. And so it's been super helpful. So wanted to also ask you about the dynamics of masculine and feminine energies in the creation of business, when we're talking about playing roles in our purpose and like moving forward into the way that we're showing up and doing our work. So how do those roles play for you?
It's really interesting, because I feel like the masculine and feminine energy, it's the thing that we eventually get to after several kind of weeks of going around different other things with like sort of clients. Then we realize, oh, there's some kind of misalignment or rejection or pushback on either the masculine or the feminine energy, or it's in some kind of wounded form so that it's not coming through in the most powerful way. So that's just kind of to give you context into how powerful it is, for how it actually informs a creative process. But to give you a sort of broader overview of what it is, so you can actually understand what that means. So if you see that the masculine energy is more of a kind of force of doing, so it's an energy that emanates or comes forth from you that's very sharp, it's very focused, it's very solution orientated. So it brings the stuff of what you're creating to life, quite a linear is like a very common word that's used for it. So it's the space that you're in when you're getting things done, essentially. So, but one thing that is often not, I feel like, described as much with the masculine energy is the sense that it actually holds you. So it holds you in your creative process. It holds your desires, your wants, your needs, your capacity. So it's got a very strong like holding container energy for your creative process. And that masculine energy can go to its wounded form, which can be kind of more pushy, domineering, relentless, unforgiving. That's how I know it shows up for me. I go into this like incessant train of doing, and like you go into this space of kind of being task oriented at any cost. So you'll often find that you switch into the wounded form and you're working until say 2 a.m. when you know that you should be resting, for example. So it's actually often reflected from, because I also work in the shamanic realms as well, is that the west of the wheel is all about introspection, healing, balance, all of that kind of thing. And from an actual kind of like the actual Native American perspective, they only have the women chiefs in the West, because the women are representative of this intuition and introspection, or they have an understanding of it. So it's almost like kind of showing in that culture as well how important the rest and replenishment is, and how the masculine doesn't necessarily have as much of an understanding of it. So it's often not allowed to represent in that way. Whereas a feminine, on the other hand, is creativity, it's this out-of-box thinking, play, experimentation. And there's a real deep understanding of the need to rest when the time is right, so that because there's a balance of what's needed over a period of time. Often I like to see the feminine as this kind of instinctual force that really understands what's needed from the environment, what's needed from the self. And she has this ability to see what's needed to bring everything to life. So she's almost like the tender or the gardener of the creative ideas. Like she brings everything into the right place and orientation within yourself, within the environment, so that the thing has the best opportunity to bloom or to blossom. So in many ways, once you've had an idea, it's kind of not your own anymore. It then becomes its own life force that wants to become a thing. So the feminine within you does everything that's necessary. So rest and prepping your environment, managing your internal physiology, making sure everything's in alignment, bringing you into community if that feels like it's important, and also the sense of self-appreciation so that you feel strong enough in yourself to actually come forward and create the thing. So actually the way that you can almost see the feminine as this kind of like value. She values things. Like she has the sense of valuing herself, valuing how she creates. And it's almost in this real sense of strong value in herself that the masculine comes in as an energy within you and wants to make it a thing, because there's so much value in what you feel like you've created within yourself to sort of bring her forward. But then also the feminine can go into this more wounded form where she can kind of self-weaken. There's a sense of, apologizing profusely. The codependency is often seen in the kind of wounded feminine. And what I've seen so much, and particularly in business owners, is confusion when the wounded feminine comes in. It's like, there's just so many ideas. I'm just overwhelmed with ideas. And there's a sense that there's not kind of the strength or the direction or the focus to actually turn them into a thing. So that's kind of the best. It's so expansive. It's hard to kind of articulate it so condensedly, but that's kind of the best articulation of what the masculine and feminine is. And so when we start to bring these two into balance, and we're very sensitive to where if we're overplaying in the masculine or overplaying in the feminine, or they're not really speaking to each other, then we're almost harnessing our energy in a really powerful, co-creative and sensitive way to how we best create in the world. It's probably the best way to start that without speaking for too long.
Absolutely. Yeah, that all tracks with me too, thinking about the journey that I've been in, swinging too far to the masculine, where I just felt like it was go, 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 here's the plan, like I need to be doing this, and striking out, and having that energy of being task oriented, and it's got to be this very like play by play, go here, do this, and then losing myself in that feeling of like, wait, now it doesn't feel heart centered. Now I'm not as connected with the purpose and their creativity. I was losing myself in the drive of it, and then needing to go back. And then when the pendulum swung too far to the feminine, I was feeling very just lost with all my ideas, not able to really like grab on. It just felt like it was like everything was like almost too fluid and too it was just confusing. And so really just finding that balance between getting really clear on the idea, really like leaning into the creativity, and then inserting the masculine energy to like protect it and to hold that in its form.
It's really interesting because often when I'm working with clients, they'll say, yeah, but like, how do I do the feminine? How do I do I don't really know what I'm doing when I'm doing the feminine. So it's an interest, it's almost like, how do we go even deeper to kind of take it out of this conceptual realm and actually understand and be embodied in ourselves, and know when we're a bit too much this way, or where there's something wounded inside of us that's making us swing that way. It's a very kind of sensitive balance that can be quite difficult to think your way to in some ways. You really need to start experimenting and playing with the concepts of it and seeing how it lands for you in your own body. So like for me, when I'm over masculinized, I tend to get very tired. Like it's like I'm kind of like, why am I'm just so tired? I'm kind of, it's like I'm trying to inject this creativity, which is kind of not there because I'm so over masculinized, into this linear thing, but there's nothing in it. So it's like, it's dry. It's almost like running an engine on dry in some way. So then I need to take a step back and be like, right, okay, so how can I start to inject more lubrication, I suppose, into this engine, so that it's not just kind of like this dry, hollow, task-oriented, focused thing that's just moving forward relentlessly for no particular reason that I can understand. So then that's when you kind of shift over to, right, okay, how can I get into play? How can I start to alchemize my energy? How can I, what can I dance? Can I don't know, doodle, do a mandala? You're very creative yourself, Holly. So this sense of like, just allowing yourself or giving yourself permission in the moment to come out of that push and just saying it's safe, it's okay to come over here and do something creative, to be playful, to awaken that creative energy within me, so that there's something real and raw and coming from that blueprint of the Akasha that wants to be held and move forward by the masculine. Because without that, he's just like, okay, well, I'll take this stuff, but there's like literally nothing in it. So,
Yes, and what came up for me was also in my working with you was this this need to go back and heal this like child part of myself too. And so through working in business, it's so funny the way that doing soul aligned business will flush up all the things to the surface that you did not know that you needed to heal, and also that I was trying to not think about and not deal with. I'm just like, let's just sweep that away. Let's just moving on. It's fine. But what ended up happening was when you're talking about the grinding of the gears and not having the lubrication, it felt like it was getting to this grinding machine kind of feeling, and flushing up, and it had elements of like power and control for me, and like staying motivated, and rebellion, and all these interesting elements that came up when what it really needs to be is a symphony versus a grinding machine. And so what I was finding is that needing to go back and heal do some inner child work, and deal with needing to feel protected, needing to feel nurtured, so that and then allowing myself to just sit in that place, in that shadow of not feeling it for a bit in order to heal it and bring it forth and have a better balance of power and control. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely, it's very interesting how these kind of core fundamental energies, that it's almost like this is the energy that our soul is riding through on, is our almost proportion of masculine and feminine energy that's coming through. So I'm thinking when I've dropped in with the Akashic Records for me, it was like 60-40. So if I'm trying to over push on masculine, it's like I'm putting all of my eggs into the basket of my 40%. And then I'm totally missing out on the other 60% that's over here, that's just not being used in some way. So that's kind of that fundamental underlying thing that's happening underneath it. But almost layered on top of that are the things that you just described there. We've got the shadow work, and you've got the inner child work. And in many ways, when you actually break down a lot of those kind of practices, there's still the masculine feminine influence that's actually kind of underlying it. So with the wounded feminine, for example, there's a sense of codependency and this over apologizing and things like that, which also comes out through some of the inner child work that we're doing. And then it's almost like all the layers underneath it as well get healed through this more kind of the inner child work. It layers down, and it heals also our relationship and balance with our masculine and feminine energies, and what we allow ourselves to actually bring through from that soul space in some way.
Yes. And what I find that has been happening, at least in my generation, being in like Gen X, and the message that, when I was young, that, the feminine was undesirable, or, not intelligent, or not, like, and that, not appropriate for, like girls don't do math and science and things like that. And so, and I was pre-med in college, and like having to kind of buck those norms. But then, realizing that my youth, my younger like feminine side, my the child goddess did not have the nurturing that was needed. And so when that happens, we default to being masculine in our approach, going out like, I can do it too. Like I can be a doctor. I can do all these things that men do, quote unquote, that was kind of my generation coming up. I was born in the 70s, and then pushing that, pushing against that. And then what ends up happening is, we have these, we end up as women that are, like brash and abrasive and like cutthroat, and have this this different energy of how we approach things and work things. And it's this it's a force versus like a strength. And so the power versus force. And so well, it ends up being this it's just not fully integrated, not fully aligned. And so what I realized that I needed to do is go back and heal that that inner child, divine feminine. And so that's what I've been doing with all your work. And it's been really powerful to go back and do that, because I need that foundation. And now that I'm doing that, I feel like I can serve with more integrated, more balanced. And then like the masculine and the feminine eventually don't even they don't even have that separation eventually. And it just becomes this like almost like there's no need for the compartments. They just dissolve, and then we become this more just fluid co-creator that has no boundaries like that, or no what's the word, limitations.
It's interesting, isn't it, how it, to as we're at the beginning of this journey, it's like we have to piecemeal kind of parse everything out and articulate, oh, the masculine's this, and when it's like this, it's like that. Whereas I feel like you shared, as we start to become more practiced in this, we're in this very fluid, also I'm kind of seeing like this oscillation of energy that's going backwards and forwards, and we're in this real harmony, and it's just musical almost, the way that we actually are so sensitive and aligning in the best way that we can. And none of this stuff has been taught to us, like what you were showing about the inner child work. All of us have kind of been, I would say all of us has been brought up in this society where a lot of the masculine, feminine energies and the way they've shown up have been fairly unhealthy. I mean, I know that that's one of my big life lessons from being in my Akashic Records, is I've had, honestly, the best embodiment of like patriarchal, domineering, masculine, and wounded, martyr, victim, feminine. And it's just been played out on this intense stage, like something out of a Greek tragedy through my childhood. And I'm here now in this space where I'm making sense of it and trying to, come from that perspective, the zoomed out perspective, where it's like, oh, okay, well, this has been part of my stage play. This is kind of what I'm here to learn. This is how I'm here to unpack it. Yes, it looks kind of negative. Actually, it's here as a gift, all those different things. And all of that, that inner child work and the underlying work is to help me understand and come into a healing, sovereign space with the masculine, feminine pains that I feel like I've experienced growing up, and possibly in past lives, who knows.
Absolutely. I'm seeing that too. And then having, now I have a teenager that's, my son is a teenager, and just seeing the younger generations now kind of rejecting those compartmentalizations of masculine and feminine, and just really leaning into a more fluidity of, non-binary representation, and just saying like, I refuse to be, contained or limited by, this or that. And it's, it's been such a lesson. It's been such a beautiful thing to watch the generations just refuse that, in the way that they are expecting to show up without that limitation and already consorted, and which is just, it's just magical to watch. And so I feel like I'm going back and fixing those foundational parts, because what I found is the closer I get to truly being able to send my business, my purpose out in ripple effects, these things, these like weak places in, the past, that in my shadow that needs to be integrated or flushing up. And that's what working with you has done for me, is made me realize that there are some places that I need to address now, because it would be so much more difficult to do it when I'm like fully expansive and creating these ripples. I don't want to send those ripples out into the world with my business without being, you know, fully integrated and doing that inner child work, that shadow work that the Akasha has been helping me with.
It's really interesting. One thing that because you know, sometimes I've brought this up with various people, and they say, "Oh, I don't like this kind of masculine, feminine, male, female. It's like boxing too much, and it, you know, it doesn't almost feel modern. Actually, it's kind of the way they've articulated it." And another one thing that came through was this sense of divine androgyny, which I was just like, that's interesting, because it's this idea of the fusion. It's the two being together and being in such a fluid, moving space that it is androgyny. It's kind of like this is the divine androgyny, is the oneness, the ultimate kind of coming together to the point that we don't need to unpackage everything. It's just that when you're in this learning stage, sometimes it's helpful, but then other people find it very, very, very jolting. So you've got to be very discerning and sensitive with how you feel like you best work, and honor that as best you can.
Indeed. Being, you know, coming up in the generation that I came up in, there is just a lot of healing that needs to happen with those. And I have noticed that times when I had a really funny experience posting something about the divine masculine, and people just went completely haywire. And it was so triggering to so many people, even just those words, divine masculine. And what I realized is it was, one, it was the people who did not have those the need to go back and heal those were just like, how dare you bring up this old, you know, archetype or whatever. And then other people were coming forth with, you know, the patriarchal wound and the God wound when I said that. And but truly this divine androgyny, I really connect to that, because, you know, we're supposedly made in God's image, and like, but there's males and females and everything in between. So which is it? I really do think it's those that truly learn how to run the balance and the symphony of the masculine and feminine so much that it doesn't even require the limitations of it, are closer to the divine, is what I've been seeing and experiencing. So having the Akasha help us to pull those things back up to be healed has been really powerful.
One thing I just mentioned before we move to the next one is, what I noticed with the masculine and feminine is that it's often sort of people who are in this more energetic space where we can read energy, and it's beyond the physical, it's beyond anything that we can see. It's just a sense, a feeling, an energy that's coming through. So, you know, often with my clients, because they're already in this space, you can almost just articulate it in a poetic way and they totally get it, because we're speaking energy, we're not speaking in anything that's physically here. So I think as the world becomes more energetically fluent, a lot of these things will kind of fall away, and we'll almost be using poetry more to describe what's going on than actually all these kind of like box things that we're trying to make sense of in our patriarchal minds that have been formed in that way. So
I agree. I feel like we're starting to get more like that we're evolving as a species, and starting to see different ways that people are showing up as non-binary, people are showing up as neurodivergent. And so that is a great, you know, segue to that there's been a rise of awareness around mental health and neurodivergent individual differences. So how do you feel entrepreneurs, particularly those in the healing and coaching space, can adjust their messaging and offers in light of this to best serve their clients and to stay in their power while creating?
This for me is such an interesting topic, and it's in a way I'm at my edge a little bit with this because it's so new. I don't have any answers. I just feel like it's a thing that we need to raise awareness around. You know, like there's autism, ADHD, then you know, this acquired neurodiversity. You know, I had a friend who was in a cycling accident, which kind of altered their whole brain formation and how they were thinking, and the way that they were thinking and what they could take in and how they could take it in. Not to mention another one that occurred to me just before we came on this call was Lyme disease. Like that can really kind of change the way that you take on information, what you're available for in different things. And that's obviously going to be on a scale as well. So with some people it's not so intense, and then other people it's really intense and they're going through, you know, deep healing with that. And then you've got dyslexia, and not to mention general mental health. I mean, that they're almost a little bit separate, I would say, kind of, because everyone is affected by mental health and in some way, but it's a whole area that I feel like isn't really spoken about or isn't really addressed within the way that people are creating, particularly I would say in the coaching industry, where it's kind of like, just heal your mindset, you just need to kind of go and do this and go and do that and do these practices, and not really taking into account that, for example, if you're ADHD like my husband is, he sees things in such a visual, creative way that when he's kind of sent off down a path of like filling out these bland kind of exercise sheets, it simply just doesn't do anything for him. Like he just doesn't get anything out of it. And then the downside of that, in my opinion, is that you then go into the shame spiral of like, oh, this doesn't work for me, I'm really stupid, I'm just not the kind of, when it's actually nothing to do with you, it's to do with the way that the teaching has been set up. So it's almost like the teaching system, which in a way has been failing in many ways for many years, it's now just being passed on down into the coaching industry, so that all of the people who are wounded through the teaching system are now going on to just teach in the same way in their own business. And it's like this perpetuating cycle that's actually causing quite a lot of harm, in my opinion.
I agree. I definitely have a heart for and deep interest in neurodivergence, and just, having ADD myself, and certain interesting sensitivities. Like I consider myself a highly sensitive person, and I'm trying to figure out the relationship between that and psychic ability and empaths, and the sensitivity and the neurological way that we're wired, and learning how to tap into that. And I do feel like I personally need something that's not, like nonconformist. Like I need something that is, like I was in gifted, and I needed something different that was set up for my mind to really grab onto, that feeds me, that makes me feel not, because sometimes with just the status quo and the very linear math based, sometimes things are can be very I end up getting lost in that, and then I don't feel fed, and then I don't know how to move, and then I get rebellious. And that's what kind of what we're dealing with in my, our personal coaching relationship, is me trying to fit myself into a box of strategies, and feeling like it just really doesn't, my neurology won't conform to that. And so so how do you work with people in creating that coaching space, and helping people to not only work with their own neurology, but also to be more accessible to this what I feel like is this other being that has been well, let's see, let me breathe into it. Or I'll just pause and let you
okay. So for me, well, I feel like there's a few pieces going into, and I'm certainly learning along with all of us right now around this. So in many ways, like, I'm not sure I can give a whole answer to this, but in what's coming out from the way that these coaching containers and different communities are being created, is that they're not, whilst there is that shame spiral that I previously articulated, oh, this isn't working for me, like blah, 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 there's also the sense that because there's a lack of awareness around it, there's so many gifts that all of these different neurodivergent people can bring forward, that there's nothing about the environment that is actually helping nurture it. So for example, like with my husband, he's so creative, and I feel like whenever, and just like the way that his mind works, if I'm kind of giving him or asking him to help me out with this like really dry task, like there's a and obviously when you're in a relationship, there's like a temptation to be like, oh, come on, that blah, 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 blah. But actually what I find is that if I'm sort of supporting him in his creativity and helping him express it, or giving him the container for actually being more expressive and allowing his gifts to come out, there's all these new perspectives, all these new possibilities, all these kind of like out of the box ways of approaching a task that actually, when you look on when you log into the admin, or like the area of your coaching training where it's telling you how to build this business, and it's like, do this, do this, do this, do this, there's this out of the box way that we thought to approach it that's like a million times better, but they would never suggest it, or that they just don't, the way that they've been taught doesn't even allow them to create their coaching containers and their different kind of packages in a way that actually even supports that. So for me, I think awareness is a huge one. And when you generally learn the art, I suppose, of coaching, you're not really imposing your way of thinking on people. You're actually just guiding them to their best expression. So the more that you can lean into that guide way, where you're actually helping someone see what their best creative expression is, rather than you have to do it in this robotic way or you're not doing it right, then I think there's going to be more that comes forward in that space that's more powerful, more inclusive, more sensitive, probably even will adapt the way that some of these other containers are being created, so that they're even more powerful for, I don't know, non-neurodivergent people. So there's so many different ways that I think it could be approached. I don't know if any of them will work, because I don't feel like it's ever really, it's so new that it's like a new thing that people are exploring, I would say.
Indeed. So, so you feel that entrepreneurs often overconsume and become obsessive with strategy, is what I'm hearing. But you feel like this is a small part of creating a successful business. So what's overlooked or more important in your opinion, and why?
I feel like we've touched on it somewhat earlier, and perhaps it's a culmination of all the different things that we've been speaking about. But it's this sense of, what are you leaving behind as you're trying to create this? Like, what part of you is just not on board with the thing that you're trying to create here, and what needs to happen for you to help it feel safe to be coming along for this journey? And this is often what I feel like, just simply because it's kind of like the harder work, really. Like, it's easier to say, oh, I logged into the coaching area and it said that I just need to go out and call a bunch of people. I just need to DM a bunch of people and invite them into this and do it. And it's just like, do you know how many people I've worked with where they literally can repeat back that to me? Like, they know that they need to do it. And I'm like 4 calls in and they're just like, I'm just not doing it. Like, I'm just simply not moving. So it's just like, well, right, you know the strategy. Like, it's like the easier, people just aren't doing it. And for me, I've noticed that a lot of the bro marketers, maybe like they have an awareness that this is present, but it's not really addressed with the level of sensitivity or the care and the attention that I feel like it really needs. And there almost needs to be this patience that comes in as we're sitting with all parts of ourselves and actually, encouraging and allowing those parts of ourselves to come along for the journey. So, for example, for me, and a lot of these parts are kind of shameful. Like, we don't really want to admit that we have these different parts of us that are feeling and resisting certain things. So I'll give an example with me. I've kind of had this ongoing like intimacy issue, which I thought was just relegated to relationships, where I'm kind of like, oh, I just don't want to get too intimate, it's unsafe, because my kind of background is, when I was young, to get more close with my caregivers was for them to push me away further. So I learned this kind of coping mechanism where if I keep a safe enough distance from them, they're not going to abandon me. So literally every time I'm now entering into any kind of intimate relationship with anyone, there's a part of me that's saying, if you do this, you're going to be left out and abandoned to die. Like, that's a pretty heavy thing to be contesting with each time you're simply going and doing this small thing, and the seemingly small thing in business. And I feel like you highlighted that a bit earlier when you were sort of saying you're moving forward these different things, and it's you're rebelling, or you're doing these different things that contextually you seem like, well, why am I doing that? I know that consciously I want this thing over here, but all of my insides are telling me that this is unsafe and I need to be doing something over here, or I'm going into distraction, or different things are happening for me. So when I feel like we spend some time really going deep with these aspects of it, the strategy is so easy. It's just find the right kind of client, build a thing that they really want and sell it to them. Like, it's so easy. It just doesn't take any time at all, or any focus or any real thought in many ways, I would say, once you get those things in alignment. But all of these deep parts of us that start coming up when we need to get visible, when we need to start sharing our story, when we're holding space for people and we don't think we're worthy, all of these different parts are the real things that are stopping the business from being the thing that we want it to. And when we sit down and address and be present and heal and do what's needed for those different parts of us, then we can slingshot. Like, no joke. I think you can just slingshot and jump way ahead of where you would have been if you were just grinding, trying to get forward with all the parts that you're leaving behind and dragging along for the ride when they really just don't want to go.
Indeed, indeed. I've definitely been experiencing that firsthand with going through this. So where does the Akashic Records come into play when you find yourself and your clients at this stage?
Very interesting. Yeah, I feel like, you know, it's almost the Akashic Records is such a backdrop to everything that I'm doing, that I find that when I come into this stage, and it's almost like the speaking and the coaching and the different things, it hasn't quite revealed the thing, is that when you can call in the Akashic Records and the guides and the blueprint, you almost get images and flashes of experiences that happened, of pains that happened, of and they can articulate, if you're channeling, the reason why that person is in this stuck place, so that there's so much power actually in awareness, because that's what I feel like the Akashic Records brings in these moments, is the almost exact awareness of the thing that has led them from being neutral about the thing to being in fear and resisting the thing, and the whole unfolding of how they reached that point, so that then they can go back and, what you just shared earlier, whether it's inner child work, whether it's past life stuff, whatever the thing is that's needed, start to just heal and integrate and bring that part along and back and safe and feeling like it can move forward in some way. So, and sometimes this does look like shamanic work, you know, sometimes it's just, you know, there's been an actual soul loss, which is when you can start, you know, calling in these different shamanic tools, calling back the piece that was so traumatized in that moment, so that it can come back and start, if it's appropriate, to start reintegrating and being back with the whole. So there are different tools that you can use and call on, but for me, the overarching thing of the Akashic Records is the awareness, so that you know what's needed actually, and then you can take action.
Absolutely. I think what's been coming up for me too is in my personal journey with this, was the need to go back and have compassion for the inner child, because what I feel like were some themes in some of my Akasha as well was the fear of looking weak or vulnerable, the revulsion to being pitied, like nothing, like there's this inherent thing that I feel like I'm learning lifetime to lifetime, is this don't pity me at any cost, you know. But then what's happening is that there's this it's almost blocking the compassion. Like I needed to go back and have this compassion for the inner child, without the fear of it, you know, being corrupted to like pity, because that like disconnects you from love. But when we have compassion, it removes that judgment. And so what I've been finding is that I needed to go back and have compassion, because then that way I'm not doing the self-sabotage and doing the victim energy and doing all the the rebellion and all the things. I think really what the root is that I needed to go back to allowing that inner child to have, giving that inner child the compassion that she needed, that she didn't get to have, in order to, and I feel like that's the piece that will help all of these, the blockages, the victim energy, the sabotage, the rebellion, the things that an unhealed inner child, that's how it presents in adulthood. So working with you and getting to this place where I'm really ready to be fully evolved and integrated, and ripple out into the world with a mature, integrated being. It's just flushed up that there's still this piece that needs healing. And so that's what I've been doing. And so I'm really excited to see how that's going to change things. I'm already starting to feel like I'm understanding deeper in that. I'm open to you sharing any more personal insights about what you've been seeing with me, because my viewers often, know me intimately and have been following my journey, so that they can kind of piece it together and kind of sew it to an actual real story, because some of this is so like esoteric that we're talking about. So
Yeah,
share
I feel that.
anything that
Well,
you've seen personally. For me,
yeah, I love this question. It's interesting. There was one point, and we were sort of going into or starting to get deeper into a particular area, and I think you said something like, "Oh, but it's boring," or I'm bored. And I've done this myself before, and this is almost helpful for the listeners as well. Is often when we're getting bored, it's a dissociative behavior. It's almost like a thing that we do when we're getting a bit too close to the truth, is that we almost numb out somewhat, or we're just like switching off, or we just like rolling our eyes. And actually, when you find, if you're sitting down and you're doing this kind of shadow work, or the thinking about these things, and you're like, oh, I'm bored, I'm fidgeting, and you're probably starting to get closer into that real truth space. And so stick with it, really say, why am I bored here? What is it that's boring? What am I getting closer to in some way? So that's definitely one thing that I've noticed with how when we've been working, but also I've done it, and I've definitely seen it in other people as well. I'm trying to think if there were other, it's just so interesting where, when you speak about self-sabotage, I was watching a Teal Swan video the other day, and she was saying there is actually no such thing as self-sabotage, because everything that you're doing when you're in that quote unquote self-sabotage space is that you're simply in a highly effective coping mechanism. So your body isn't aware, and your subconscious isn't aware that times have changed and things have moved on. And so when you're here in your present self and you're conscious, and you're like, oh, I really want this thing, but I'm self-sabotaging, I'm just cutting myself off at the pass, I'm not doing the thing. All that's happening is that there's something within you that's saying it's unsafe. And so it's activating a very, very capable survival or coping mechanism. And so in a way, sometimes some of the best energy that you can bring in those moments is compassion, like what you were just sharing, is this sense of like, thank you so much, body. Thank you so much. I know times have changed, but I can see what you're doing there. That's really kind. That's really sweet. You hold it, you're mindful with it, you're loving with it, rather than what often happens, and I've done this myself, it's like, oh, so annoying. Why won't it just go away? I need to get an exorcist. I need to clear this thing out, when actually what you need is to love it. What you need to do is realize it's really loving you. It's trying so hard to save and protect and support and be kind and do all the things that are needed to keep you in the thriving space that it thinks it will do if you come into that space, because that's all that is known. So it's almost like we need to start bringing in these different parts of ourselves, the higher self, the part that can see all of the different pieces that are trying to do its best for you, and then take the kind of commander seat is one of the things that they say from a shamanic perspective. Like, you sit in the commander seat, and then you, using your intention and attention and all of the tools that you have, you start to program the subconscious so that it's working in your favor, rather than doing what looks like self-sabotaging behaviors, but it's actually just self-survival behaviors. So that's really interesting.
So what would you say is the so like an overarching, like, final thoughts on why working with the Akasha and shamanic practices and pulling spiritual philosophies into business, why is that so important, just as a closing thought?
I would say that if you're not working from your blueprint, which is in the Akasha, and you're not aware of all of the static that you've collected along the way in the forms of coping behaviors like we've spoken about, resistances to your masculine and feminine, even kind of an understanding of these neurodivergent features that you may have, then you're going to find the creative process, which is what we're here to do, is to create. We are the creators, is very arduous and stressful and full of is resistance the right word, or drag? It's almost like you're sort of dragging in some way. Whereas when you start to connect in with the Akasha and tune in with that highest blueprint and all of the things that are necessary for you to reach and embody in that highest blueprint, then you're in the effortlessness, you're in the ease, you're in the trust, you're in all of those being states that we really feel like we want to be in in every moment from moment to moment. And as a great byproduct, they actually help us get what we want. So that's for me what I would say with the Akashic Records. And one thing I would mention that I don't feel like I mentioned earlier is that if you want to tune into these Akashic Records, they're completely available. They're open for you. You don't need any permissions from any other person in order to do it. You don't need to be ordained or like have anything happen for you to actually start accessing the space. They're your Akashic Records. They're open to you. You're empowered to access them. And if you want to come into the space where you start to connect in and feel that, there are two main features that will help you do that. And that is being open and receptive and having an intention. So if you just want to get started out on the absolute basics of accessing the Akashic Records, sit down in a quiet space, hold the intention to go there, and perhaps ask a question like, what's my highest and best right now? What's my purpose? Hold some kind of intention, and then sit back and receive as if you're literally sitting in a cinema and you're just allowing what is happening to present itself to you. It takes a bit of practice, as anything does. But if you want two things that will start helping you on that pathway to accessing it, those are the two things I would recommend, just so the viewers don't feel like it's kind of something that only we know about and they have to kind of access us to do it. No, you can absolutely do it yourself. And those are the two things that will help you start moving in that direction.
Excellent. And then would there be any like beginner tips on like opening it? Is it important to close it when you're done? Are there any like little operating instructions that feel important to tell beginners?
Let me feel for that. You know, everything here is all about intention and understanding and knowing the power of your intent and the power that you hold through, you know, to intend something is to actually kind of hold a thought that it is going to be. So the more you can go into the Akashic Records, rather like, oh, you know, if you go over the energy of I don't really know what I'm doing, and I don't, you know, a bit like, you know, for those who weren't here for it, it was just me and Holly. We did a little kind of, you know, this is going to be a really great conversation, and it's going to reach the people that it needs to reach. So we're holding a powerful intention before we hop on the call. Similarly, hold that powerful intention of, you know, this is going to be in my highest and best. It's going to be a really positive experience. I may not know how to open it with a prayer, but that doesn't matter because I'm empowered to access it in all moments. So I'm going in with that intention. So whatever you hold and intend in that moment, hold it strongly. And I feel like that would be, I'm kind of receiving that would be enough, because whilst the prayer that is useful, it's only to make your intent very clear. So if you can do everything you can beforehand to hold that strong intent in whatever way feels natural for you, so that you feel empowered to do it, that will be enough, in my opinion. That will be, and then it will also train you and help you learn physiologically in an embodied way. Wow, my intent is so powerful. Look at what I've been able to do, which then kind of creates this really reinforced positive upward spiral, in my opinion. So yeah, just allow yourself to do it, I would say, and practice those two things, intention and receiving, and you'll be good.
I love that. Well, that feels really empowering. Okay, well, thank you so much for this time. I would love to share with the viewers how they can work with you, what that might look like. So you want to just explain a little bit about that invitation?
Yes, absolutely. So let's go a bit deeper with this. If it feels like it speaks to you, you can reach me on my website, which is akashiccode.com. And there's also a section on there, there's a button that says free business ascension call. So that's literally a 20-minute call, totally free. It's the way that I sustainably connect with my community, and we'll go into your Akashic Records. And I actually go in with a very kind of like clear, how can we 10x your business? So we'll kind of use that as the framework. So if you're a business owner, that's something that appeals to you, we'll go in, we'll source the answer to that question. We'll call in some of your guides to really support you for that next phase. And if there's any resources or materials or podcasts or books or anything that I feel like based on what is coming through will support you, then you'll also walk away with that as well. So my intention is for that whole 20 minutes to feel like a whole self-contained beneficial experience that you can ground into. And if it feels aligned, we can explore what it might look like to go into an even deeper call. But whether or not that happens, you'll really get something out of that 20 minutes. So if you head on over to akashiccode.com, click on the button for the free business ascension call, then we'll hop on for 20 minutes and allow me to serve you.
Fantastic. And I will post those links and ways to reach Jen in the Akashic Code. And so thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Jen, for being
Thank you.
here and sharing this time with me. And I'm just so grateful for you and the Akashic Records.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a fun conversation. I could go on forever, but I really appreciate the time we've had. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And it's been such an honor to work with you and to know you. And thank you so much for the work that you've done in my life and my world and in my business. And I'm just completely grateful and just sending you lots of love and gratitude. So thank you.
Yay. Thank you.